Hello and welcome, everybody. It's great to be back. It's been a month already. It's hard to believe for me, but we've got yet another show with the Catholic Money Mastermind. And coming from the Catholic Financials Planners Network, I'm joined today by two other advisors for another round robin series. Kevin Reardon out of the Milwaukee, Wisconsin area is here. And then Deb Meyer as well out of St. Charles, Missouri. So if Kevin and Deb, if you take a moment, just say hello to our audience, it'd be great to hear from you.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me, Ben. And Deb, great to be on with you.
Hello. I'm really excited to be here. We're going to dive into, some behaviors around money. And I'm just truly looking forward to the conversation.
That's right. Yeah. Thanks for sharing some of that, Deb. I didn't tell everyone what the topic is. I'm trying to tease. I'm still learning how to do it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. I think we've teased. Yeah. We're doing great. Yeah. So I need to talk back with our editors. They're like, Ben, this is how you do it. No.
Oh, no.
So, we're going to talk about influences, the extraneous influences that come into play when it comes to our finances and more so our financial decisions. And like, what are the options, the actions that we can be taking as consumers, but maybe more so as like lay Catholic faithful, to be aware of those influences and to make sure that we're still making sound financial decisions, in the face of that, not to let the influence to decide us, but to allow us to be the ones who are still in control. Really, kind of like the rudder on a ship, not being lost to the waves of the ocean or the sea or the lake, but allow us to harvest some of those influences and allow them to continue to keep us on course, on track. And so, as we were preparing for this, what was coming to mind initially for me was just how our emotions can play pretty heavily in our decisions. Like we're really composite spirits where we have this emotional capacity to us and this rational capacity. And a lot of ways we favor and want ourselves, to be rational, to make good decisions, almost logical or even mathematical per se. That's kind of the capture of our rationality. But I mean, that's not the totality of our being. We also have our ups and downs and our good days and our bad days, and our feelings can really, weigh heavily. And, especially maybe on either side, either on our really good days or really bad days, spending or saving or some sort of ramification takes place with our money. And so it's kind of a question of like recognizing that when that's in play and then making sure that we still, we don't cause any harm to ourselves, maybe especially if we're perhaps having a bad day. And so, Kevin, as we were chatting ahead of the call, you had shared, some emotions that you feel that are really prominent when it comes into finances. Would you mind maybe just sharing a little bit of what you've seen in your own life, but also maybe in the lives of your clients that we should keep an eye out for?
Sure. Yeah, we touched briefly just to name the emotions that people typically feel. And so fear and greed are typically what we see. Greed is maybe not the right word. I think keeping up with the Joneses is one way to look at it. We're simply making consumer-driven choices that are not in line with your values. And then on the fear side, quite often we'll have people come in and they'll say, I'm afraid of the market. And a lot of times what they're trying to say is, I'm afraid of other things in life. I'm afraid of what's going on in society. I'm afraid of the polarizing things we see on television. And that comes through in conversations then about the markets and investing. And that can really get the best of people. So we spend a lot of time backing people up and really trying to identify exactly what it is that's motivating them.
Right. I mean, I suppose to the market in particular, like there's a whole risk reward relationship here. And, just with market competition and everyone looking to make money, naturally enough, if you want to see higher returns in your investments, you kind of have to take on more risk. But then that higher degree of risk also means kind of more of a grabbing onto the unknown. And that can be, unsettling and not particularly friendly. And part of some of our work is helping to adjust and make sure that whatever level of risk a client has taken is the right level of risk for them to be taking, either for their financial needs or part of their plan or their tolerance. But, more to this notion of an uncertain future, I suppose what comes to my mind is like, well, some of that's like what you have to undertake, or, if you want higher return, like it's not going to be guaranteed. Like that future return can't be certified because it wouldn't, the return wouldn't be there, wouldn't be as high. And so do you find maybe as we think a little bit about the fear with the markets, is there any bit of some of a conversation that you have with clients when they say, hey, Kevin, boy, what's going on here socially, politically, even economically has got me a little worried. I'm just I'm like on a, more of a practical portfolio management level. Do you say like, oh, maybe we need to pull the risk portfolio back a little bit? Or what are some of your clues that you have in those conversations? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's usually a divergence from things we've spoken about in the past. And so that's number one, is just identifying, is it different? Mm-hmm. And again, we had a client come in once and they were really upset with us for really doing nothing wrong. And I left the conversation really disappointed. And about a month later, the client called back and apologized and explained that they were going through some marital problems and we were at the brunt of it.
Yeah.
So here we're trying to adjust portfolios and risk level, risk tolerance, and they're not happy with these three things. And in reality, it was something going on in their personal life. And
sure. And finances just kind of got to be an expression. Like they were looking for I suppose for lack of a better term, like a scapegoat or someone to blame. And you were the one when it wasn't really you. It was just, they needed a way to kind of get it out of them, I suppose. Right.
And that happens not a lot, but a few times a year for sure.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, in my own relationship with my wife, there's sometimes there's a great line from one of Matt Maher's songs of like, would it make my life any easier if I could find someone else to blame? And I was just reflecting on that. Like sometimes I feel like my poor wife, like part of her marriage to me is like, she becomes my natural person to blame if something's not right. And it's not like she's not responsible for any of this. It's just like, I feel like I need to find someone to say like, yeah. And then it's not really, it's like me trying to escape to some degree my own responsibility. And thankfully, we come around and we recognize that and I apologize. But it sounds like your client only did the same thing. But our initial reaction, which is kind of what we're wanting to talk about here, is like we do look for other people or other things to blame. And, we're uneasy and we feel like we need to fix it, but we're not sure how. And maybe we don't want to blame ourselves, or at least that tends not to be our natural instinct to blame something else, right? Well, Deb, we're also thinking about maybe some influences, and you had also shared so I'll leave it to you to kind of maybe follow up with like some comment about some marketing influences that we see in our day and age. But you also had a bit of a colorful story related to, an opportunity earlier in your life in which you had done some investing and you didn't really have a plan for the investments. And so when things weren't going quite the way you had wanted them to go, you felt the burden of that. If you wouldn't mind, would you like to share a little bit about that
Sure.
investment that you had pursued? Yeah.
Yeah, one of my early money mistakes, I'm a longtime financial advisor now, but when I was in high school, we had this hypothetical stock portfolio. It was an economics class, and our teacher said, okay, pick 5 individual stocks, and we're going to track them throughout the year and, see who made the most money in their investments. So keep in mind, I started working when I was like 13. So I had savings even as a high schooler, and I took $2,000 of my hard-earned money, and I didn't want just the hypothetical portfolio. I wanted the real shebang. So I took $2,000, invested it in these 5 stocks that mimicked the hypothetical portfolio. But at the time, I didn't really know about diversification of industry. So I went all in tech stocks. And keep in mind, I was taking this class like late 1999, before the 2000 .com burst. And I put the vast majority of the money into tech stocks. I think I had Disney. That was my one differentiator, but it didn't appear well when the markets were going down. So I ended up selling on emotion. I was very emotionally driven because I'm like, oh my gosh, I worked so hard since age 13 for this money, and now it's down to half the value. And I couldn't take it anymore. So I sold. And I've never made the same mistake since. I realized like the error of my ways, that was not a good plan. Number one, I was emotionally driven. But number two, I didn't really think about diversification or lean on anyone else from an advisory standpoint to see like, is this a good idea to put all of these stocks in the tech sector? So truth be told, now I'm a much more conservative investor, and that's how I guide clients is okay, let's have an asset mix, an asset allocation. So we have all these different asset classes depending on, if one is down, the other will likely be up, and we'll be okay.
a better constructed portfolio, one might say,
Exactly.
right? Yeah,
Exactly.
that's good. Yeah, I mean, if we went long enough, I'm sure in any of our backgrounds there would be plenty of decisions. I got tied up with the real estate boom back in the mid 2000s, and there were, these advocates, little tutorial courses out there about how real estate never loses value, and you're always going to make money, so you just
Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah, Rich. There you go, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You got it, Deb. Yeah, he was the name of the day, Robert Kiyosaki, and so I was funding some of these courses off my credit cards, and I'm going to make it all back up through better returns, and I learned my lesson too. I think maybe as I like to sum some of that up, is this speaks actually to the matter. You had spoken of fear and greed, Kevin, and what goes hand in hand with greed is get rich quick strategies, right? Like, we all want easy money, right? I mean, nobody would be like, no, I want my money to be hard. Like every one of us wants our money to be easy, and people just love the idea of it. And so this get rich quick comes right up, and it sells really well, sells really easy. Because again, who doesn't want it? But then, if we take a step back and actually think about this a little rationally, like if everybody in the world, and I quite literally think that's true, is looking for easy money, because it's just kind of wired into us for good or bad. Like it makes it actually really difficult for there to be any easy money, just as a takeaway, folks, because we're all looking for it. So if anyone comes across it, the financial theory here would suggest that it's already gone. Like it couldn't actually still exist. And I don't know if I would completely say you're not ever going to find it, but it's difficult to find easy money. Like that's the irony behind it all. And so, let's keep in mind these get rich quick strategies are really only benefiting the people who sell them, not really the people who buy them, for sure.
And we see that a lot. Here we are, late 2024. We had a really good stock market last year, a really good stock market this year. And people are saying, hey, market's up 25%. Why is my portfolio only up 12? It's like, well, 40% of it's not in stocks.
Right.
And you go through that. We should own more stocks. Why not? And then you just need a down year as a unfortunate reminder as to the benefits of going slow and diversifying. But we hear it more often later in the go-go years, and we've had 2 really good go-go years, so we're starting to hear it more.
Yeah, let's increase. We're missing out on some of these returns. If we were all in, we would have. I mean, my portfolio maybe would have doubled. I don't know if it'd be quite that good, but I mean, like we're losing, and so there's there's that fear too. Fear and greed are so intertwined because it's as much as it's greed, it's just also fear. Like I don't, it's the FOMO. I don't want to miss out. Like, and there's also kind of this herding mentality that we have. It speaks true of in behavioral finance where. We don't want to be far from everyone else. And so if we see everyone else, getting further ahead, but we're falling behind, like that induces a sense of anxiety within us for sure. And, we'll do whatever we can to kind of catch up, and ultimately that doing whatever you can be at our own detriment. Like, well, we're hurting ourselves. So what I'd like to maybe pivot to, Deb, and we'll leave you to lead onto this, but let's talk a little bit about just some more of those extraneous influences, especially maybe when it comes to marketing. There's so many people who have their own interest out in the marketplace, and they're all trying to convince you, persuade you, sell you that, if you just do what I'm suggesting or proposing, you'll be better off. And it's not as if that's all inherently wrong or bad, but, they have their interest, right? And again, I don't think that's really we can't completely get away from that, but, the point of those sales is to be influential. Like, it is to be persuasive. And so there is need, to try to help to evaluate, like, well, is this good for me or is it not? So could you maybe just share a little bit on your thoughts on the marketing side of what kind of influences you've seen or have had to work against that if, your clients have been, being pushed around by?
Yeah, I think peers can be a big influence in current day, right? But I also like to look back even just to childhood, because I think for a lot of people, what they saw their parents modeling for them, whether their parents were responsible and were really good at tuning out some of that external noise, or whether their parents were always in that latest get rich quick scheme or succumbing to the latest pressure, like that does have a big bearing on you as an adult in your decision making. And you're either like, hey, I want to be the polar opposite of that, or yeah, I really liked how my parents handled this. Let's try to model my decisions after it. So I think you have to really examine some of the kind of childhood tendencies. And then also in the present day, just understanding that, a lot of your friends are going to have an influence on how much you get caught up in that kind of secular worldly desire. Truth be told, we relocated from Florida back to Missouri, to the Midwest just over the summer. And, down in Florida, we just felt out of place, to be honest. Like there was just a lot of consumption, a lot of people putting $100,000 pools in everywhere we turned. And we just weren't, we're just content with like going to the community pool. Just that's a blessing, right? Or like driving a car that's, it's not a luxury car, but it's a nice, reliable car that's going to get us from point A to point B. And I think for us, that was hard being in an environment where we were just always pressured to keep up with the Joneses, to buy the next newest, biggest thing. Now that we're here in the Midwest, I mean, we're not, but there's still plenty of people that drive nice cars and spend money in different ways than we would. But what Kevin said earlier, just examining those values and really understanding where your values lie as a family unit, I think is so important in deciding, okay, we're going to focus on our objectives and what we're really working towards and really try to just let other people do their stuff. So when we're looking at our own financial decision making as a family unit, we're heavily investing in like travel. And that's not to snub people's noses or whatever, but like we are spending a good amount of money traveling with our kids while they're young and still at home. And that's like a big value for us to have some of those adventurous experiences together. Now we're not spending it on luxury Porsches or whatever, but we're spending it on those experiences. So yes, you might see more in my Facebook feed of luxurious trips, but doesn't mean you need to take a luxurious trip, right? And even luxurious, it's not like I'm staying in these beautiful hotels. I'm still like penny pinching, looking at where I can get the best deal on the Airbnb and things like that. As a family of 5, you can't really stay in a traditional hotel room as easily. So that's where we're at. But even in my own clients' decisions, just seeing some of the clients that have been able to kind of put blinders on has been really helpful. And I love being a guide on that journey of trying to help them stay true to their values and what they feel God calling them to do.
Yeah, that's such a great story and example, Deb. I have one, but I'd like to share in a moment related to the influences that my youngest daughter has been seeing and then how that gets carried back over to us. But before I jump into that, I'm kind of curious, Kevin, if you have anything to share as well of ways in which either your clients have been influenced, you've been influenced, maybe your family's been influenced, and like this push. We call it keeping up with the Joneses, but like it's very real. Like we don't want to be left behind, and so it's like, oh well, if so and so's got this, I should probably have it too, right? I mean, otherwise, I'm hurting either myself or I'm hurting maybe my children, right? Have you seen any examples of that, Kevin?
If you think about it, there's tens of billions of dollars spent every month telling us to do one thing, and that's consume. Mm-hmm. You turn on the TV, consume. You open a magazine, consume. A billboard, consume. The internet ads, consume. It's just this constant secular push, and it gets ingrained in our heads. And like even with children, like my children should be on the right sports teams. And well, the sports team travels. Well, all of a sudden we're spending thousands of dollars on youth sports travel. And, it's great to spend time with kids and things like that. But at a certain point, you have to back up and really identify, where is God in the equation? It's great to look at core values, but going above core values and say, where is God in this equation? And for me, that's really focused and helped me just step away from keeping up with the Joneses. It's a little bit more challenging with clients where you have to come at that a little bit more gently, especially for clients maybe that aren't as open with their faith, is to help them discern that what is the purpose of the second home? If it is to build family experiences and it's something that's been in your, part of your value proposition for years and years, great. But if you want to buy a second home on a golf course because the Hall of Fame pitcher happens to have a place in that golf community, and for some reason that's important to you, that's where I think people really get off base. And it's just, we live in such a secular society, and the mantra, every day we see it, consume, consume, consume.
Right. And it's this false promise too, but it's like somehow this is going to bring contentment and satisfaction. But I mean, there's been studies done by this, and not even necessarily faith-based. I mean, we're just talking like secular, psychological, sociological studies of what the contentment between happiness and the amount of money you have. And, there's very little indication that the more and more wealth or possessions you have will lead to happiness. And in fact, there's some extent, I mean, they've done studies of, indigenous tribes, people who live not quite in squalor, but just primitively, very little, like mud huts, made out of,
right,
grass and dung. And their sense of happiness is just as great as someone who has a multi-million-dollar mansion and, jets and all this other stuff. Like, they're just as content. And so like somehow this idea that like, oh, if we get more money, we'll be happier. Like, it's really just not true, right? Like, there's almost no evidence for it, but we feel so strongly. Like, it seems like it has to be true because it's so prominent in our society, right?
I don't know if you guys have ever done a mission trip, but you go to these third world countries where people are truly poor and they live hand to mouth, and they are happy. Mm-hmm. This contentment and joy that they experience every day. And yet you come back home where we have all these wonderful amenities and blessings. And yet it's a little bit, we view it to be a struggle sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you feel almost robbed. Like, it's like I'm not getting the same level. So, I mean, maybe to return to some of the story that I just had, I've never really, my girls are relatively young yet, but they're getting to be an age where they're having friends and they're play dates and they're getting out of the house and they're getting away. And so they're spending maybe an afternoon or an evening with another friend's home. And, we have, we're doing well for ourselves, but it's modest. And we have, we're kind of redirecting our focus on more intangible goods. And so my youngest daughter was staying at the house of folks who were very well-to-do. They're both in the medical profession, really high paid, very nice home, very nice cars. I mean, and I think, on one hand, good for them. They have the means to afford all this stuff, but a very distinctly different housing situation. And so like my daughter came home from all this and was like, oh, Dad, our house is so small and so boring and it's not rich. We're not rich at all. My friends are rich. And like, it went on for like the next 2 days. And I don't think you realize actually just how hard that was on me. Like, I'm doing the best I can for you, kid. And I'm really trying to provide. But it's like, I mean, you're kind of tearing me to pieces. So she's just 7, so I'm going to give her a pass and just love her regardless. But it's like, wow, okay. I have never expected in my life to like be getting that message of not keeping up through the Joneses through my kids. Right. So just to say, like, I mean, it comes through all forms. And,
it's only going to get worse, Ben.
Is that right? Okay, that's what you're telling me. So
I'm speaking as a mom of 15, 11, and 9. I'm like, it's just, yeah.
Why don't we have nicer cars, Dad? And I thought I can start driving around with the nicer cars. And this is going back to another Matt Mark quote, actually. He's one of my favorite artists for sure. I mean, he's got this line that there will always be something just out of reach. And it's just like, that's just true. Like, even if I got something nicer, guess what? Something else will still be out of reach. If we just adjust and now still feel like, oh, well, it's only a Porsche, I want a Ferrari or something, right? I mean, it's, we start to feel like that's still not good enough. So, I mean, just recognizing that, look, there are lots of influences. We do the best we can. We're trying to make the right decisions, but our emotions certainly come into play us, and we're feeling these pulls and tugs coming through all the different means. What I have seen in my own life and in the lives of my clients is like the best antidote to this is really just to have a plan, like to have something that grounds us and keeps us on track. We know what our priorities are. We know what our values are. We know what we're seeking to achieve. And to some extent, we can kind of put blinders on the world and just say it's not necessarily bad, but people have these things. Like, I don't have any issue with other people spending their wealth necessarily in the way they do. But like, that doesn't mean that's the way I need to spend it, or these aren't, their priorities don't need to become my priorities. And so I think, I suppose what I'd like to talk about, Kevin, is just in your experience, like what's the difference you think of the plan? Is that really, is it just as simple as like what fixes this, what addresses it is having a plan, setting your own goals, setting your own course, and then staying true to that. Is that what we need to do, in your opinion?
Sounds so simple. Right.
All right.
We do spend time up front in a client relationship really trying to figure out what a person's goals are. And it's interesting 3, 4, 5 years later when the client comes in and they're doing something contrary to the goals they told us about. And it's interesting to then bring them back and say, well, wait a minute, you had referenced this when we had these conversations early on about financial security and things like that. Now you're doing things that are outside the scope of that. And it does lead to some interesting conversations because first off, there's a little bit of denial saying, well, no, I can make this next consumer-driven purchase or lifestyle adjustment and it's still within my goals. And that's where we as a guide have to step in and say, no, it's not. And with the beauty with financial planning software is you can literally say, let's add a big expense to the plan and graphically it'll show the client, here's the net result. And as the guide, we would simply step back and say, listen, it is your money. It is your life. This is the impact. Choose wisely. And frequently the only challenge that the next challenge with that is clients are a little bit in denial what it would look like when they're 80 years old and they're really having to choose between prescription drugs or food. I mean, if it gets that bad. And so we do have to have some tough love, but having a goal or having a plan, certainly it seems so simple, but that's really the start of it. And having a guide or an advisor to hold you accountable is, I think, the next best step.
Right. Yeah. So Deb, I would think that, thanks for those thoughts, Kevin. What do you find, Deb, as part of the creation of a plan? So we say, you need to have a plan, but this helps, we can't really stay true to a plan unless we have one, right? So there is no course to stay the course on. And you're like a ship without a rudder. Like, it's probably just the simplest, most direct way to handle it. Like, the waves and the wind will push you around and you're really just subject to the fluences outside of you. And you've chosen to not have control. So like having a plan is really us exercising the control we have and then making decisions of what do I have control over? What do I don't? And then let's proceed accordingly. Like, we can still navigate these influences. Like, what do you feel as part of having a plan? Like, what have you seen that you've needed to do? Or, I mean, do your clients that come to you, and maybe this is a better way I want to ask this, is already come to you with a plan, or is part of your work to help clarify that? Or like, what's some of the work you do to help firm this up?
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, they know they want to make better choices in the future, but they're just not quite sure how to get there, right? So typically they're hiring an advisor where they're already, they have good financial habits in place. They're saving, they're spending less than they're earning on an after-tax basis. So they have extra money. They don't know quite where to be allocating that. And, I work with a fair amount of people in the accumulation phase. I also have some retirees, but most, I would say 2/3 of my clients are probably in that accumulation phase where they're still growing and earning. And for a lot of them, it's just a matter of clarifying what those core values are, and then also understanding what some of those initial goals are and long-term goals. So those that are, have young kids at home and are trying to put them through private Catholic school or getting them to college, like just figuring out, okay, what are those expenses? How much of those expenses do you want to cover for college, for example? And then understanding as life changes, what are some of the other things that we need to modify within that plan? So I don't ever have a lengthy, 50-page financial plan that just collects dust. I'm always meeting with the client, trying to revisit what we had before in terms of goals, but also understand, are there any new goals that we need to be aware of in the next 12 months and then even looking 5 years out. So just understanding some of those decisions is really important, and then seeing how we're progressing according to those benchmarks. when we start working with clients, a lot of people are in a place where they don't feel they know they're making good money, but they're not quite sure why they don't have more to show for it in the bank accounts and the investment accounts. And for them, it's just gratifying when we can see that net worth build over time and see that the choices they're making on a regular basis are having a measurable impact. And it's really gratifying.
Right. I mean, we're really trying to find that balance because we don't want to go and save everything to the future and then, not have anything for the present. And then especially, I mean, this happens, people were saving it all potentially for retirement. And then, a year after you retire, you pass away. And then it's like, well, you don't there's no trailer attached to your hearse, right? You don't take it with you. And, good can certainly come from all of that hard work, but at least in terms of your own personal gratification, it's like, well, that was a bit of a miss. But on the other hand, I mean, we need to be saving something. We can't spend it all today because at some point we're not going to be able to keep working, and we need some ways to support ourselves into the future. And so, a lot of our work is just trying to find that right balance of like how much can we take care of into the future, but at the same time being able to live a life that we're happy to live. We want to keep living, and we don't have because if we save too much, you really start to come into an issue of burnout. You're just like, man, this stinks. Like all I do is work, and I don't get to enjoy any of it. It's not sustainable into the long term. So it's trying to find that balance between what we can do and what we can't do, and then what's the right arrangement for you to be able to keep things where you're fine, you're going to be okay. And so, Kevin, as we kind of come to the end of the conversation here, I mean, even with a plan in place, though, like keeping the plan can still be challenging. The plan is really impactful, it's super important. It does help us to make sure that the person is where they need to be, ideally optimal, or in that position of being okay. But we still all have our own struggles. I was just sharing before the call that I was supposed to get up and work out this morning, and it is here in the Northern Plains suddenly rather cold and dark, so like it's not so easy to get out of bed and make your way to the gym. And so I know it's good for me. I know I'm supposed to do it. It's the right thing to do. I really should have, but yet it's like, oh gosh, like can I come up with something else, right? And I mean, that's just one example of other ways in which we kind of talk ourselves out of our decisions. And so I'm kind of curious, Kevin, as people maybe struggle, they have a plan, but they're still struggling to achieve it. Like, what would be some counsel or guidance you could offer to help people?
I was going to ask, Ben, if you had an accountability partner or a personal trainer who was waiting for you at the gym at 7 a.m., I bet you would have gotten up and gone. And that's our role as an advisor, is to be that accountability coach. But to your point, perspective, quite often, again, we're working every day. We're in the weeds. We meaning clients. They're laboring forward. They've got families, businesses, careers, what have you. And quite often, year to year, they don't think they're making progress. And it's neat for us to be able to put on the screen. We have a net worth statement. Look at the assets and think about all the blessings. The software we use actually lets you go backwards. And so we can go backwards and say, wow, look at where you were 5 years ago. And the client, you can see their eyes come alive like, oh my goodness, how far we've come. And then you can put a projection on the screen that says, with the assumptions we've been working on all these years, look where you're headed. And you have this aha moment from clients where they can now discern issues and decisions better because they have that perspective. And so having that financial advisor, financial coach, however you want to label it, as a true partner guiding you forward. I even think of myself, I have a colleague here in the office that helps me as I sometimes lose perspective. And we all need that. And that's the beauty and the blessing of our career here as advisors, is to be able to walk with people forward and give them some of that perspective.
Yeah, that's just so well said, Kevin. I mean, really what you're kind of echoing is just like, look, we all need support. Like, we can't do this alone. What's your network? Who are there to support you and keep you to do the things you want to do? Because, if it's just up to us to make our own decisions, we may do okay. But, to your point about me getting up this morning, like maybe I need to go and talk to a friend. The funny thing is just last night, actually, I was just talking to a buddy. He's like, hey, you want to start joining me in the weight room with another guy? I was like, it required going to another gym and a difference. But now, I'll have to reconsider that. It's like, you know what, you probably are right. Like if I just had someone else saying like I don't want to miss out, like I would have gotten up, So it's a small little change, but that would have been enough to get me to get going. So, Deb, in your experience, would you echo Kevin's sentiment? Do you have more to add?
Yeah, it was
to those
very
thoughts?
well said. I do think there's also something about building that positive momentum. So just to go back to the gym example, I did actually hire a personal trainer when we relocated back here to Missouri. And because it was hard for me to like get back into the routine of working out and gym. I'd done a lot with the move. And I'm now at the point where I actually am ending the personal training services because I'm going to the gym religiously, like every day that I'm available, that I have later meetings and don't need to be there right at, 8:30 in the morning or whatever for a meeting. It's really beneficial. So just having that trainer that I had to show up for at least once a week, meet with her. And then the other days I knew she was going to check to see if I went to the gym and did my other workouts that were required. So it's that same kind of idea with finances. Like if you build that positive momentum, it's just that much easier to keep going forward in that direction. So even when you're saying like, hey, I'm going to Starbucks more often than I should be, and I really want to save an extra, even if it's just starting small, save an extra $25 a month and by foregoing Starbucks one day per week, right? And just having that positive muscle being built where you're saying, okay, I made a chai tea at home instead of buying it at Starbucks. Like that is a savings that you can bank on and say, okay, now maybe I can build on that habit and take this next habit and invest the $25 that I'm saving by not going to Starbucks, invest it in something that's going to earn 7% per year return, or the hope that it's going to earn 7 or 8% return per year. But just having those habits really does make a huge difference.
Yeah, what I'm taking from both of you then is like, look, it's a combination of baby steps. Like sometimes just like, let's start small and do a little bit. We can build upon that. So we got to start somewhere. Rome wasn't built in a day, as they say. So let's just start with something. And then also let's gather some people to gather around in yourself, a network who can support and encourage you and give you some accountability. But they support you. Like, maybe just recognize that, hey, I could use some support, and let's reach out to some others, some friends, and see in what ways, that support can happen. But then, we'd be amiss not to acknowledge, look, if you guys are looking for a financial advisor, especially a Catholic financial advisor, there's a Catholic Financial Planners Network. And so, we're growing every month. We're adding a few new members. And so we'd love to have you reach out to the network, see if you could find an advisor that's a good fit for your needs and who can help step in and be that support role to you and that guide in your finances. And, we have a lot of satisfied and happy clients, and, we love the work that we do. And so we'd love to be able to help make a meaningful impact in your finances and, take some of these influences that we all have and we're all experiencing that, we have in our own lives, but help to kind of put some of that off to the side, to come up with a plan that makes sense for us, if you will, but to put the blinders on and to stay the course to our plan. And then also, having the value and the benefit of working with an advisor that shares our faith, and to recognize that, look, not all of this is just our own work. There is a part of this where we need to turn to God for sure, praise him and bless him for the good things that he has done for us. And then to recognize at the end of the day, all of this is his providence. And, when we trust in him, like we don't have crystal balls, but, we do have kneelers. And so we can kneel and we can say prayers. And, and that's a difference. That's a value for sure. So Deb and Kevin, thanks so much for being on the call with me. I really just love this conversation. If someone wanted to learn a little bit more about either one of you and your respective practices, Kevin, where would they go to learn more?
Sure. Shakespeare Wealth Management's company. So shakespearewm.com is the website. And certainly if you have questions, happy to help in any way we can.
Awesome.
And then for Deb, if someone wanted to reach out to you, where should they go?
Worthynest.com, WORTHYNEST.com.
Awesome. Well, Kevin and Devin, thanks so much for being on the call today and sharing some of your thoughts, your wisdom, and your guidance. And We're thinking of you as we turn into Thanksgiving and the holiday season. God's blessings to you. And for all of it who are listening, maybe getting this a little bit after Christmas, but certainly wish you, good tidings on the new year when you hear this show. So God bless you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.